Hello everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of the Case Broadcast. And it's a big hello from me, Patrick Twitchett, the Simplifier.
And it's a big hello from me, Melvin Manning from M&M.
And it's also a hello from our guest today,
Michael Levitt. Pleasure to be with you today.
Yeah, nice to see you, Michael. Nice to see you again. So, welcome everybody. This is our Case Broadcast. It's reaching out to you. You can see all our other episodes on YouTube. You can also listen to them on your favourite podcast channel. And today, Michael is going to be speaking to us about something that he's experienced himself. So he's got first-hand experience of this, and it's a word that we often hear bandied about a lot these days, which is burnout. And I think years ago it was called nervous breakdowns and various other terminology, but it all is down to this pretty important topic for everybody to understand. So, Michael, first of all, please introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit about your background and what it is that you do, please.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate your time today. Yes, again, I'm Michael Levitt, and I'm the founder and chief burnout officer of the Breakfast Leadership Network. It's an organization that I formed several years ago that was birthed out of my own burnout experience. And this organization speaks around the globe at conferences and works with Fortune 500 to small businesses to burnout proof their leadership and their organization. Excellent,
excellent. So today you're obviously going to talk through that subject with us. Do lead us off and by all means filter in some of your personal experience as well, Michael.
Yeah, burnout is one of those things that's been around for a long time. I mean, we hear about it, and thankfully there's conversations around it, because for the longest time, much like any mental health challenge, publicly it wasn't a safe place to talk about being burned out. But we're seeing several articles, all types of books, including my own, Burnout Proof, that have come out to talk about burnout. And I'm thankful when I see new books or articles on the subject that's not necessarily coming from me, because the dialogue is happening, which means awareness is happening. And ultimately, we get to find out what burnout is, what are the signs, what can we do to recover from it, and most importantly, what can we do to prevent it from happening again? Because I hear time and time again, people said, yeah, I've been burned out a few times. Well, in my story, my burnout nearly killed me, and I certainly don't want to flirt with that again. So I designed a life after a lot of research and self-reflection and understanding who I am and what was important to me at the time to reshape my life. And I always tell people, if you're burned out, you don't necessarily have to reinvent your life. In my situation, I had to, but in most cases, it's making simple adjustments, little things here and there, not big changes, just little ones, just like throwing a pebble across a pond. The ripple effect from that little pebble is gigantic. The same thing with making little adjustments in your life that prioritize you in your wellness, in your well-being, in your joy and fulfillment in life. When you do those things, you get better, you feel better, you're less stressed. And burnout, as the World Health Organization defined it, because they, back in 2019, before they started doing a lot of work on a particular pandemic that we're dealing with, they determined and basically assigned burnout as an occupational phenomenon. Burnout tends to happen in work situations, but you can have family burnout and life situations that cause you burnout as well. It's a series of events, prolonged stress that are unaddressed. You feel fatigued, you're worn out, you're unable to make decisions, you're overwhelmed by life. And if I ask this in an audience, okay, who feels like that right now? Typically, I see a lot of hands go up in the air, because a lot of people are feeling fatigued. They're feeling stressed. They're worn out. They're tired. Their to-do list is long. They're overwhelmed with things, and they're not really sure what to do to get past that. So my burnout journey, I'll share that real quick. Back in 2009, I was a healthcare executive for a small healthcare organization just outside of Windsor, Ontario, Canada. I'm a dual citizen, both in the US and Canada. So I like to joke that I can vote and screw up 2 countries. And then I leave it there. I never tell anybody who I voted for, because then, especially in the United States, half the audience would hang up or disconnect or turn off the podcast or turn off the video because they're mad at me because I voted for this person versus this one. So I think we have a lot more in common than different, but eventually maybe one day we'll figure that out. But in this healthcare role, I was working just insane hours, basically from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m., 7 days a week for a couple of years, because I started in 2007. And it all came to a crashing halt in May of 2009 and over a period of a year, from May 2009 to May 2010, the following happened to me. I had a heart attack that should have killed me. And then 17 weeks later, I lost that job during what in the US we called the Great Recession. There was just jobs being lost everywhere, mortgage defaults, you name it, people losing their homes, everything. A few months later, because I was unemployed and you couldn't find jobs easily, my family car was repossessed by the bank. And then ultimately in May 2010, my home was foreclosed. So heart attack, job loss, car repossession, home foreclosure, all in a year. And all of the things happened to me because I was burned out. I wasn't taking care of myself. I was working long hours. I wasn't eating well. I wasn't getting any exercise to speak of. The stress of all those hours and the commitments that I was making was overwhelming me. And, my relationships, both work and in personal lives, were being impacted as well. And my cardiologist told me that the heart attack should have killed me. And it didn't. So I'm very thankful for that. And after having all those things happen to me, it was one of those situations where I had a choice. I could, one, play victim, blame everybody, instead of taking ownership on my part in all of those situations. I could have said, wow, I'm Superman. I survived all those things. I'm just going to continue living the way that I was living. Or the path less traveled, unfortunately, is I decided to take a deep, hard look in how my life was and how I was living. What were my behaviors? What were my habits? What were my thoughts, my beliefs, all of those things. And again, most people don't have to go through that exercise, but in my situation, because of the severity of what happened to me, I felt that I needed to. So I did, and discovered a lot about me, discovered a lot about my upbringing, which had a great upbringing, no complaints there. But, there's always nuances of how you're raised and different beliefs and things that get thrown into the mix.
Sure.
So for me to be able to go through all of those examples and just kind of reinvent myself created a life for me that was free from burnout. I knew what the signs were. I knew what I needed to do to prevent that from ever happening again, because just because I have a cardiologist doesn't mean I want to see them all the time. And I made the necessary changes from a nutrition, a lifestyle changes. So, I don't have to see the cardiologist that often, thankfully. And so, that's my background. And that's from there, after reinventing my life, I went back into healthcare, which my parents wanted to have me committed. They're like, wait a minute, you're going back to the field that nearly killed you. What are you thinking? And I knew that I could go into it and do it differently and do it better. It was a challenge for myself, and I did. And I was quite successful. And then working with people in the healthcare system, I started seeing a lot of people burning out. And I thought, okay, I have to do something about this. I felt a call. It's like, I need to do something about this. I need to bring awareness of what burnout is and hopefully help people change the trajectory of where they're going in life, so they don't burn out. They don't have to have a year of worst case scenarios like I did and all the things that happened to me. So by doing that, I'm like, an idea came about, and I just started doing some things and writing articles, and one thing led to another. And then I said, oh, let's do a podcast. And then the name of the business came to mind. And then next thing you know, it just took on life of its own. And it's been nonstop entertainment ever since.
Okay, so your experience, obviously, you mentioned there about what happened to you, and that obviously when you went back into the workplace, that helped you to then recognize those warning signs, those beacons in other people that were, suffering the same. Now, because you've obviously been in that and you went back into that same career, did you find that your sensitivity to, or your awareness of it, was much more heightened having reevaluated it yourself?
Definitely. And even my physician had told me that I was going to be more aware of my health and how I was feeling than I'd ever been in my entire life. And he was spot on correct. And any type of aches or pains or something that's a little bit different, I notice them. Now, I don't go into a hypochondriac type of situation and go, okay, how do I do with this? I just observe it. Okay, well, let's see. Maybe I just did something weird or slept funny, or maybe I ate something that's giving me a little discomfort. Let's just see how this goes. And the majority of the time, it goes away after a short period of time. But noticing it in others, because if you know your people, your colleagues, people that you work with or work for, if you see them going down a path of prolonged stress, they demonstrate the signs. They're fatigued. Maybe they're not clear in what they're talking about, or they're not understanding or comprehending what you need them to do or what they're working on. If they start missing more work, and this is before obviously the pandemic of people missing work, but even now, this pandemic has been very stressful and very prolonged as well. So just observing people, and if you know what they're normally like, you can see some signs, and you go, okay, all right, let's create an environment where we can have some dialogue around this. Now, in my situation, when I was going through my burned out state, I was the last person on the planet to know about it. I talked to colleagues and loved ones, like, yeah, we knew you were burned out. And I asked them, well, why didn't you tell me anything about it? Why didn't you warn me? And they said, we did. You didn't hear us. So it's when you're in that deep state of burnout, you may hear things, but you're not listening and you're not taking it to heart. And that was my situation. So it's like, okay, we need to listen a little bit more and listen for those clues and warning signs and prompts from people that know us, that want the best for us. And if I would have done that, I'm not saying that I would have necessarily prevented the cardiac event, but I could have been checked out, and they could have done something to prevent it from happening, for sure.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, having experienced it myself previously as well in previous careers, and I know Melvin too has had experiences of overwhelm, things like that. He's got his own story as well. And coming through that, I always remember the situation. I always likened it to a glass of water. When you're in that situation, you've got so many things going on around you. It's like the cup is now full, and any more water you're pouring in is just pouring over the side. So you're forgetting everything because there's no capacity. You're running at max capacity, aren't you? So again, you're quite ignorant of a lot of things going on around you, because it's almost like these walls closing in around you, isn't it? Of all the overwhelming burden of it, I suppose is the right words to use. How do you, once you see these signs in other people, and it'd be good for you to talk about some of those signs so that some of our listeners could take that away when they go back and see their teams. But also, in addition to that, how do you then approach that person in a way that they can accept that, receive it, and see it, to help them, because that's the key catalyst of the turning point for them, isn't it?
It definitely is. So I'll start off some of the signs. Number one, if you're fatigued and you're not sleeping well, and I'm not talking about just one night of bad sleep, I'm talking several nights or just consistently not sleeping well, that is such a huge domino on every other aspect of your life, from your ability to recognize patterns, communication, relationships, digestive problems, all kinds of different things. You need to get good restful sleep. If you don't, it impacts everything. And we know that if we go out, on a Friday or Saturday night, and we're out a little bit longer than we normally are that next day, unless we're blessed with a great metabolism and all of that, we're feeling a little lethargic the next day, depending on how many pints we consumed the night before.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know anything about that, but anyway, I read it in a book. Yeah. So, but I know it's like, okay, that's not going to be good. Now, with your stress and burnout, you're kind of in that state all the time, and that impacts your relationships, that impacts your cognitive ability. It also can create additional problems as far as mistakes at work, or maybe short fused, or you might have a little bit of a temper where you're argumentative with colleagues or your family, friends, or your boss. I've seen it where people start yelling at their boss. I'm like, well, that's not good for long-term capacity at the organization. Also, another sign is if you're not motivated to do things, and I'm not talking about lack of motivation on a Monday morning when you're in the office or working somewhere where you're like, I don't feel like doing this. You don't feel like doing anything. You don't feel like going to, a football game, or going to the pub, or going to the movies, or all the fun stuff that you normally like to do. You start cutting those things out, and you say, well, I'm just too busy right now. Okay, that might be something in a particular season, but if it's prolonged and it goes on and work's not quote unquote easing up a bit, or you're just overcommitting yourself, that's a big problem. So that's a lot of the signs that I had all of them. I checked all the boxes. And when I see people maybe working longer hours at work, and they're looking a little, I don't know, worn down, or if it's a colleague, you're looking like, okay, they're not the same. Could be anything. Could be anything. Maybe they're a caregiver for a loved one. Maybe they're going through relationship issues. Maybe they have financial troubles, because there's all kinds of different excuses and things that can happen that can kind of weigh us down a bit. So the key thing is, if you have a good relationship with that individual, ask them, okay, how are things? And they'll say, fine, just really busy at work. And say, okay, is there, what are you working on? And because I think one of the things that happens is when you're burned out or stressed out, your ability to kind of control how you spend your time gets impacted as well. So it happens, things take longer than they should, because again, your head's in a fog. Your cognitive ability has been reduced. So it takes you longer to do things than it used to. So again, that's another thing. If you're a manager, for example, and all of a sudden your team's getting results to you a little bit slower than normal, or maybe there's more mistakes, it's definitely something to look into. It's like, okay, something's amiss. And having an environment where they feel comfortable at least sharing that they're struggling with some stuff, that helps a lot, because then you can say, okay, well, let's reprioritize things. Because I see this in organizations all the time with managers, the good ones and the not so good ones, is they are really good at delegating their work, and they delegate things to their teams, and they have some superstar employees, and they have them work on some great things. But as a leader or a manager, and I've been guilty of this as well, we forget how much we've delegated to somebody. So we can accidentally overwhelm one of our team members because we've just not kept track of what we're having them do. And as an employee, when your boss or a manager delegates you something, you think, okay, they expect me to do this, but I also have to do these other things as well. there's just not enough time in the day. So I'll work longer hours. You're stressed because you want to go home, you want to go watch the game, you want to go do this, gotta do that. That starts getting cut out. So then you're like, well, you know what? I was going to get that workout, during lunch. I was going to do a walking lunch, but we've got this deadline. So I'm just going to inhale something from the vending machine and just continue working. Well, you didn't get any exercise. You ate something that wasn't good for you. And now your energy is going to be reduced, which means your body's fighting off that stuff instead of using it for your brain to be able to work through what you're working through quicker. So what happens is you start seeing all of these things connect. This big ball of flesh that we walk around with all the time is extremely complex, but it's extremely connected. So the fuel that we put in with fuel of rest, fuel of foods that are right for us, stress management techniques, activity, all of that helps you keep your stress reduced. And if you don't have prolonged stress, you won't burn out. So we have to get more in tune. At the end of the day, we have to get more in tune with us and who we are, how we feel, pay more attention to that. And when we do that, then you can adjust along the way. That's the big takeaway is just, get more in tune with how you feel, and figure out, okay, if you're feeling good in a particular day, awesome. Okay, what did you do to create that day to feel that way? Once you get awareness of what you're doing to make you feel that way, wash, rinse, repeat, keep doing it. And you'll figure out, wow, I feel better over a prolonged period of time.
Yeah, sure. And I suppose in that, because every case is different, and there, like you say, there can be underlying things, there can be things at home, and there can also be people that have a tendency to suffer from anxiety or maybe depression, can be like an underlying factor that can accentuate things. How do people help other people or help themselves to recognize how they particularly became burned out in the first place, and to then rectify the situation?
A key thing that I have people do, or if they don't, then they should, is be really diligent in tracking how you spend your time. And now, my original career was in public accounting, and we had billable hours, so we had to keep track of our time. Back in the day, before we had Excel spreadsheets and all of that, was these big green ledgers, and we had to fill it out with a pencil to keep track of who we're billing, how much time we spent on it, and all of that. So
yeah.
I naturally knew how to keep track of my time, but what I was lousy at was making sure that I scheduled time for me, self-care time, me time, relaxation time. Now, when people hear the phrase self-care, they think, okay, he's talking about yoga or meditation and all that. And that's great if you want to do all of that. But you know what? If you like watching Marvel movies or watching English Premier League, maybe you're an Arsenal fan or Liverpool or Chelsea, who knows, whoever your favorite team is.
Or Tottenham, we have to say Tottenham as well, apparently.
Tottenham,
You'll be all right with Melvin then.
Tottenham is good, and I love the AI that they use in that stadium. It's absolutely. I was talking with a gentleman who is an AI expert that works with Forbes, and he was sharing with me some of the stories of what that stadium does, and it's mind blowing, and it's like it creates an experience, and I think that ties into having a life where you can be free of burnout. Is don't focus so much on the stuff, the latest iPhones or the latest big screen televisions and all that, or, and I'm not knocking those things. There are things that are really nice to have.
Yeah.
But experiences, and Tottenham, for example, going into that stadium, which is on my bucket list, is an experience, and that's the thing. And keeping track of your time helps you make sure that you are harmonizing your me time with your activity and your work time. Because a good colleague of mine, Virginia, taught me this a few years ago, because she looked at my calendar, and again, I keep track of everything. And she said, okay, I don't, and she actually called me out on this. This week I don't see a whole lot of self-care or me time on your calendar. I said, well, it's right here and here and here. She said, okay, we'll put it down. So literally write it down on your calendar, no matter if you have a digital calendar or paper calendar. You have to schedule those things, because what gets scheduled gets done. If you don't schedule it, you're not going to do it. So, and another thing that she taught me was to color code, or if you're colorblind, use your favorite symbol for those self-care appointments you have on your calendar. By doing that, then if it's color code, for example, they said with this color coding system, whatever works for you is great, but make sure your self-care time is colored with your favorite color, because your brain and your eyes are naturally attracted to your favorite color. Mine happens to be blue. So I'm looking at the camera right now, but I can see the background on Patrick's screen is a tone of blue. So my brain's going blue. I see it. So, and the reason why you want to use your favorite color or your favorite symbol is you can squint and look at your calendar, whether again, paper or digital, not see any of the text. You can look, and if you don't see enough of your favorite color, that's an issue. That means you're not spending enough time this week or this day on taking care of yourself. So that gives you an opportunity to adjust. You can either adjust later in the week. Maybe you can do something today, but maybe it'll be later in the week, or it might just be a busy week. And it's like, okay, well, let's look at next week and make sure that I do this. I think we all want a perfect balance. Okay, I'm going to spend 22.5 hours every week taking care of me and my self-care time. That's not how life works. It's a harmony. It's not a balance. We hear work-life balance, impossible. You can't balance the two. You're one individual. You can harmonize things. So you can, balance, or I use a bad word there. You can harmonize your work and leisure time. Yes, there might be weeks or days that you can't get as much in. So let's say you go for an hour-long walk every day. All right, do a 15-minute walk. You're still doing it. You're still doing a little bit. Coffee meeting. If you normally have a coffee date with your friend and you're usually there for an hour and a half, and this week, no, got to cut it down to a half an hour. You still did it. So you're still doing some things in life that you enjoy doing. And when you do that, that joy and fulfillment is a positive for yourself. You feel better. All of a sudden, that pressure in your shoulders starts to decrease a little bit. So then you're like, okay, I know I got a big, difficult thing to work on at work, but I'm a little bit more relaxed. I feel a little bit more refreshed. Okay, let's go through this. And you can kind of remove some of the emotion away from the stressful moment. And if you're in a more of a relaxed or restful state, those emotional situations you deal with work don't carry the same amount of weight as they do if you're tense, because you go in and you're dreading Monday because you're going to have that difficult meeting. Well, you're basically lining it up to be a stressful situation. So you know what, I'm going to go in with this with the best expectations. I'm going to get plenty of rest, so I'm clear and I can wade through the emotions and get to the fact of the matter. And when you do that, it cuts down the noise. And many times when you are that calming force and going into a situation like that, people tend to gravitate and mimic behavior. So what'll happen is all of a sudden they're like, okay, it takes down a couple notches. And I've seen this in meetings time and time again, where it's a stressful meeting. It's like someone goes in, okay, let's just do this. Let's break this down into manageable chunks. And we're going to be successful in doing this. It turns the temperature down a bit, and all of a sudden they feel better. May still not have been pleasant, but it wasn't as bad. So lots of techniques on that. But the big takeaway is get real close with your calendar and how you spend your time. Make sure you schedule time taking care of yourself, doing, again, self-care things you like doing in life. Book those things on the calendar, and you'll find that it'll help reduce your stress.
So it's an ongoing thing rather than just take a 3-week holiday or whatever, and then just spend the next 49 weeks going hell for leather. It's that regular maintenance, isn't it? I suppose
it is, and by doing this and having this be your normal routine of doing things in life you enjoy doing all the time, as much as you can, then when you actually do go on holiday, you're not this big stress case that's going to take 3 or 4 days to unwind from everything that's
Yeah.
happened. And then you finally start eat, and we hear this. We go on a vacation. First 2 or 3 days, we're just, okay, now I need to detox from all the things that have been going on. All right, then great. So now here we are, day 3 or day 4 of your holiday. You're like, okay, now I'm starting to feel better. You start enjoying what you're doing wherever you happen to be vacationing. And I look at that and I go, yeah, but you lost 3 days because you were detoxing. Why don't you detox before you go? Work with, and try to wind things down. So whenever I go on any type of holiday or trip or things like that, I know when I'll be, starting it. So I ease into it. So that way I don't have to go, okay, now it's off. For me, by doing that, and this is, as business owners and entrepreneurs, very difficult for us to shut down because our brains are constantly moving. And I know, your listeners know what I'm talking about. When you actually are off of work, you're like, but I want to. And that's okay. And that's again, another way people burn out is we're doing things we love doing that we're good at. And we actually enjoy doing them. But what happens is we overcommit ourselves to the point where it takes a toll on us. So, and it's an ongoing thing, like you said. It's an ongoing process. It's not something where you set it and forget it. I wish it was, but it's not. So it's getting a better understanding of how you operate and how you tick and what motivates you changes over time. And so will be how you spend your time. But ultimately you want to make sure that you get the good sleep, you eat the right foods for you, and everybody's different on that. So figure out what foods are good for you and what foods aren't. So that way your gut bacteria doesn't have to fight off things that aren't good for you. That will help with your sleep, and make sure that you schedule some me time in your calendar every week. And when you do those things, it keeps your stress reduced, and then you won't burn out.
Yeah. And I remember when I went through those stressful times that your stomach is hugely affected. Mine definitely was. And it wasn't till years and years later that I realized it was this it's almost a fight or flight reflex where under stress your body reacts in that way, like you're facing a lion. You've either got to just freeze or run, fight or flight. And so all the blood's going to your extremities, your hands and your feet, ready to run or fight or whatever. And it's taking that blood away from your stomach lining, which is then degrading and causing all these untold problems. All of a sudden you're eating food that you've always eaten, and now it's reacting with you because the stomach lining is affected. It really does impact that, and I suppose bringing that calming down is the only thing that's going to settle it. And of course, we have like omeprazole or Gaviscon or whatever you do, and people are chucking that down and to try and balance it, and they're just putting a sticky plaster on a deeper rooted matter, aren't they?
They are. And one of the things that I did last year was, and you can get them online and your physician or medical provider can guide you through this, but I obtained a food intolerance test, and they tested me on over 250 foods. And because I knew that I had some food allergies that I knew about before, but I knew that there were other things that bothered me because I would, keep track of a food journal and all of that. And also, I would see, okay, how did I sleep last night? Okay, why did I sleep well? Why did I didn't sleep good? So the food intolerance test, shed some lights on some things that I had intolerances to that I was unaware that I did. And when I started phasing those things out of my diet, I found that my gut bacteria was working better. I was sleeping better because I wasn't having acid reflux or anything like that going on, which is great because we do so much damage to ourselves on a daily basis. When we sleep and get good deep sleep, that's when our body is repairing the damage. And if our body has to use, like you said, all the energy to deal with, the gut stuff, because there's food in there that's not good for you,
Yeah.
then that means it's taking energy from repairing all the other stuff and just focusing on that. So that means you're not really repairing the damage you did to yourself today. Well, if that continues, guess what? Today's damage turns into tomorrow's damage, the next day, the next day, the next day. And then you end up with clogged arteries, and you get to understand cardiology terminology, which, quite frankly, unless that's an interest of you, I would highly recommend people try to steer away from that.
Yes.
It's not a fun experience.
Definitely not. Definitely not. And I know Melvin and I are always talking, and Melvin, you've experienced quite a bit of overwhelm, because I know you're a very conscientious chap and you're very willing to help everyone, which is often a much of a curse, saying yes too many times. And I think you've dealt with some of that yourself recently, haven't you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been in business now for 42 years. I started my first business at 19. Now, obviously, that's a lot of years of ups and downs and all sorts of experiences working in and out of organizations which have grown from nothing to being quite sizable. The recognition of burnout in my world has been quite prominent with my own, let's say, endeavors on how it can not just ruin your business life, it does ruin your family life and everything else around, and a lot of friendships along the way. My thing I'd like to just put to Michael before I go into a whole in-depth thing, which would take hours and hours, which we haven't got time for, is the case of, you talk about the fact of, you're burning out because you're doing X, Y, and Z, and you're working ridiculous hours and what have you. I mean, I've had days where I haven't gone home for 3 days, maybe 4 in some cases. Slept on the floor of the office, slept on the, on my desk chair, slept on my desk, putting out, I mean, back in my heyday, I was a London advertising agency director and studio managing director. And we had to get campaigns out, and it was a big thing, but it was my passion. It was really a lovely business. I was really enjoying myself. But then when you reflect at the point of burnout, I would ask you, Michael, are you in the right business? Or do you really passionately like that business? Or are you in the wrong business and you need to reflect on looking at perhaps another avenue?
That's a great point. And I think passion is one of those things that is awesome, but can also get us in trouble if we don't have boundaries around it. And we see that, the story of you sleeping in your office and sleeping on a desk. It's like one of those things that's like, well, squirrel away some of the proceeds from your successful campaigns and maybe buy a bed or a couch for your room. Although that's not exactly the best idea, but at least if you're gonna sleep in there, you have something a little bit more comfortable than an office chair or a table type of thing. But that's what happens. Burnout often happens with people that are passionate about what they do, or if they're in the serving community. We see it in healthcare. Burnout's impacting every industry, but the service industry, nurses, physicians, healthcare, nonprofit, agencies, even successful businesses that are doing great marketing campaigns and all of that stuff. You love that work, but as you said, unless you can put some boundaries around how much time you spend on that compared to the other things in life that are important, family, friends, doing things in life outside of work that you enjoy to do, it can build up and take a toll. And then all of a sudden that passion becomes a burden where you start losing interest in it. And it's a case where, taking a step back going, okay, even though I'm really good at this, do I want to continue doing this? And that's a good.
But no, but it's like, as you experience, it might kill you. And do people actually realize that? I mean, all right, I'll be very honest, and it might sound a bit blasé. I did it because I was earning a great deal of money. I had a great life. My family had a great life. I didn't see much of my children growing up, so there was obviously a sacrifice there. However, it then ended up, long story short, in divorce after 33 years. Now, no matter what the reasons are, it happened, and it wasn't meant to happen necessarily. However, things in life happen for a reason, don't they?
Mhm. They
Now,
do.
you don't marry to get divorced. You marry forever, and you go into business, you go into a vocation. It's forever. But unfortunately, sometimes there are situations that deliver messages to you that you don't listen to. And it's sort of like, no, it's going to be fine. It's going to be great. No. It's great advice. Thank you very much for the advice, and then just carry on. And I did that. The biggest mistake in my life.
Yeah, because what happens is we see you land that big client and you're like, okay, now this is really going to take our organization to a new level.
Yeah.
But what are the costs? And
Yeah.
not just the, okay, do we got to bring on additional
Yeah.
marketing people or ad design people? We look at that from an income statement. So, okay, what's the bottom line going to be impacted? What do we need to do in order to offset this? But there's other costs as far as your time. And that is one commodity you will never earn back. You can't.
I mean, define the word sacrifice in your world, Michael, because obviously having gone through what you've been through and you've now written the book, you've got your, was it Burnout Proof?
Burnout Proof. Yep. That's my new book. Yep.
The conclusion of what, I mean, I haven't read your book yet, so forgive me.
No worries.
But the conclusion of your findings, what's the solution?
The key solution is you have to find the right amount of time for you to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And that can vary. Some people, they can work a 60, 70-hour week and still be happy, healthy, no stress, and enjoying that. There are other people that anything more than maybe 30 or 40 hours is crushing to them. And again, it could be, there's a lot of factors, and there could be commitments. It could be maybe they're in the wrong field. Maybe, again, they're really passionate about this field. But again, like we talked about before, it may no longer be the right field for you. For me, I've changed careers many times and thankful for all the opportunities that I've had. But I wouldn't go back to any of those industries because I did it. There's no motivation for me. Just because I'm good at it doesn't mean I should do it.
No.
And that's a self-reflection exercise for a lot of people to determine, okay, why is that important to you? What's your motivation to work in this industry? Okay, make money. Great. All right, that helps. It's that keeps things moving. It keeps the lights on, and it gets you be able to buy cool hats and and go on holidays and all of that kind of good stuff.
So I would put this to you, which is something that I've realized probably in the last 3 to 5 years. What are my terms? So in other words, for argument's sake, if, like you just gave a little synopsis there, if someone came to you from your past and said, would you come back and do X, Y, and Z? And as much as you may have the passion for it, or as much as you might have the skill set to do what is required to be achieved, it has to be on your terms, not theirs. Otherwise, you will die, or you will get very ill, or it will be a disaster, whichever the case may be. And that's something that I've identified personally. And I've now, for whatever reason, I fall, speaking of myself, and I shouldn't be doing that, it's your podcast, but I've realized that I'm actually a much better business coach than I am actually on the other side of the fence.
And that discovery was because you came up with, and I was
tired, Michael. I was tired.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people that are listening to this right now, I'm sure many of them are tired. And it's a case of, figuring out What are your terms?
Yeah, but what does tired mean?
Yeah.
It's, you are inspiring people to think.
Yeah.
And I have to say, because obviously when Patrick introduced me to you and your synopsis and what you did, and I thought, but we know all about that. But the reality is, no, we don't. I have had friends, and I'm sure you've had that situation. But I'm not sure. Are you based in Canada or in America? Where are you?
Both. I spent a good chunk of my time in Toronto, but I'm also based out of Southern California.
Yes,
So,
indeed, San Diego. Yeah.
Yep.
So I have friends in the city of London. Friends that back in the day they used to be in the towers in New York, which before they obviously had that disaster at various banks, and the burnout there. My God, it was physical, let alone mental. And I used to watch people literally. I mean, you joked about me laying on my desk. These guys were laying on the floor because they physically couldn't talk anymore. They were completely mentally unstable and out of it. But the desire for the money, the desire for that big deal, the drive for that success is obviously what is trying to get them over whatever hill they're trying to climb.
Yeah.
People needs to reflect. People need to look at, really, is that where I want to be headed?
Mm-hmm. Well,
before I die, literally kill myself.
Well, there's a story or a poem that I read. I don't remember who wrote it. It was basically where it was this fisherman, and he spends his day fishing, and he spends his day with his family. And he's really good at fishing, to the point where he's getting a lot of fish. And so a big company, got wind of this. So they reached out to him and say, you know what, come work for us. You'll make all of this money. You'll be able to, demonstrate how to fish and, produce all this stuff. And then after, 20 years, then you'll be able to retire and you'll have, all the stuff in there. I said, but what's important to you? He said, what will you do when you retire? I said, well, I will fish all day and I will spend time with my family. He's already doing that.
Yeah.
So it's a case of, what's the opportunity cost? Okay, you want to make a lot of money. Why? What would you do with that? What would that do? You want to buy a Lamborghini or Bentley? Okay, yeah, you're going to need to be able to do that unless you can finance it. I would hate to see what the car payment would be, but you can do that. But ultimately, you have to figure out, okay, why do I want to do this? Is this important to me? Is this important because my family wants me to have this, or society tells me I should do this? You have to have that self-reflection, and it's a great exercise to do frequently. I'm not saying every morning, but maybe once a quarter, once every 6 months, worst case scenario, only once a year. But reflect. I'm a big fan of journaling, so I journal a lot, and I look back and I can see areas of growth, I can see areas of struggle, I can see areas of reflection, because I look back and you got to do this in a non-judgmental way. Please do not be a bad judge of yourself. We all make mistakes. We all screw up. We all make choices that at the time seem like the right thing to do, and it may or may not have been. But you have to love yourself first, because think about it. Who do you spend more time with in your life?
Yourself.
Yeah, we're always hanging around. Some of us want to could you go hide in the corner for a minute? I'm going to go over here. No, we're always here. But ultimately, doing that reflection and what motivates you, what's important to you, and just observe. When you do that, then you can start making some choices, creating those terms, and coming up, this is what I'm going to do. And when you go into that, especially if you're looking to switch jobs, which seems like everybody's doing that right now. A lot of people are quitting. The Great Resignation is a phrase we're hearing over here. So that's great. You want to go to another job. Well, don't go in there bringing the old baggage, because guess what? You're going to have the same situation here.
And we're finding a lot of people, which obviously does cause burnout. I mean, I'm not experiencing, but I'm seeing is people overpromise and underdeliver. And these people come into these new opportunities, but they don't last very long.
Yeah.
And then there's regrets, and then there's even more stress.
Yeah, the communication of what is going to be expected, what the environment is, and all that, because it's like it in a way. It's like when you go to apply for a new job, it's almost like dating somebody new. Of course, they're going to put their best foot forward. They're going to dress really well and all of that, and then once everything's done and you're in the relationship, then the true self comes out. Well, ideally, you want to get to the true self as quickly as you can, so you can see, is this actually beneficial for both parties or not, and sticking to those terms. And again, I love the use that analogy is so important for people. It's like, what is important to you? When are you available after hours? And there's some parts of the world and some states in the US and some countries that are establishing do not contact people after a certain number of work hours, so your boss can't text you at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night. It's unfortunate that we have to legislate that, but most organizations, you don't need to do that. You really don't. Some, okay, I get, if you're, in IT, for example, and the network is down, okay, yeah, that's kind of part of the routine, but for the most part, it's not. So we've got into this habit of being able to be constantly connected with our iBankies. Then, yeah, well, you know what? You got to have boundaries around that too. So it's an ongoing thing, and ultimately, once you start establishing your terms, stick to them, and it'll you might tick some people off. Good. Because people will walk right over your boundaries if you let them. Don't let them.
Yeah, no, I'm a big advocate of that. Big advocate. So, Michael, if you were taking one of our, and please God, you may do so. I mean, I don't know what Patrick's arranging, but if you were taking one of our sessions, which we do once a month, when you lead in, what would you put down as your top 5 points to look for to recognize the fact that somebody is in trouble? And I'm putting it in a very succinct way there.
Yeah,
they're in trouble.
Yeah, they're in trouble is if you're working with somebody, or they're working for you, or even if it's your boss.
Well, even if it's a work colleague.
The work colleague.
You see a guy and saying, "Hey, whoa, is there a problem? Can I help you?"
Yeah.
What are you looking for? What are the signs in your experience?
You're looking for change in behavior.
Yeah.
That's one. Number 2, if they just looking at them, if they look defeated, or a lot of times I'll use the phrase, they look kind of gray, where they don't have as much color into them, and it's because their body is fatigued and they're not resting and all of that kind of good stuff. That's a big thing. If you hear of them getting in trouble at work, or they're making mistakes, or they're missing deadlines that's not normal for them, that's definitely a warning sign. Additional things is, if you used to, they're just not as engaging, and that kind of ties into the behavior thing too, where they're not their normal self. They're not going to lunch with you. They're not grabbing a cup of coffee with you. They're just kind of irritated, or even to the point where they're almost confrontational. You're like, okay, what got into them? It's like, and again, it could be anything. Could be a home situation, could be work, could be everything. Sometimes when you're burned out, all of a sudden the world feels like it's collapsing on you and everything is falling apart, which most cases isn't the situation, but when you're in it, it certainly feels that way. And then ultimately, if you notice that permeating through other parts, let's say they're part of a team, and you're starting to see that part of their team where it's like, okay, normally that team's pretty good, but now all of a sudden they're not, something's a little off with that. That's definitely some warning signs to look out for.
Yeah.
I often look for a desk that never changes. The papers are still in the same places for days on end.
Mm.
And I'm thinking to myself, what's going on there?
Yeah.
We need to have a chat.
Yeah, because they might just be frozen. They may not be able to function and go, I don't know what to work on next. And that's not normal for them. It's like, okay, well, let's take a step back and see what's going on. And then once they feel at ease and it takes the burden away from them a little bit, just by talking about it a little bit, that can kind of be the spark for them to get kind of back into the rhythm. It's like, oh, well, let's just work on this. And okay, you've got 10 things in your to-do list. Well, you're not going to be able to do all 10. Let's do one. What's one of those things do you think you could finish this afternoon?
Spot on.
And they do it, and it's like, oh, good. You actually, and you can joke with them if you got a good relationship. Oh, wow, you actually finished something, and they'll laugh. And then that, of course, is a very big healing mechanism for us, is just to be able to laugh, even in our own struggles. Sometimes laughing about them is a good start.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, sure. And I like that, because it's almost like when you're going out for a meal. If you've got a menu with 50 options on it, you can spend ages and ages deliberating what you're going to have to eat. But when it's got 4 or 5, that decision is so much easier. It is breaking those tasks down. It just makes decisions easier to make, doesn't it? And then it releases that paralysis, I think is probably the right word for it, isn't it?
Yeah.
So would it be fair to say a lot of these answers are in your book?
Yep, definitely. Yeah. The simplification of things is a great way, especially if you're overwhelmed. It's like, then simplify.
So how do we get your book? How do our listeners, our viewers, how do we get it?
It's on Amazon worldwide. You can find it in all the bookstores. It might be in some local bookstores as well. I get notification that I've sold some books outside of the big Amazon company, so that's always a nice discovery, and it pays for a cup of coffee or two, which is always good.
Have we got plenty of stock in the UK?
I certainly hope so. If not, then I will work with our UK publishers and say, rectify that, please. Yeah, it's definitely available.
Cool.
Excellent.
So Patrick, over to you, Patrick. Have we covered the points?
I think we have. I don't think there's anything left to summarize, really. I think you've covered some really great points there. I think what Melvin expressed at the end there, which is emphasizing those real key points again, because it's a pandemic in itself, isn't it? Burnout. And I think we need to be aware of each other, and just have a listening ear is what a lot of people need. Just that support, isn't it?
COVID hasn't helped anybody, despite the fact that people have been working from home, or their circumstances have changed, or they've been put on. I mean, I don't know whether you've had furlough in America or in Canada, but we've had a big thing with furlough here in the UK, which is obviously ended. When was it? Last September here in the UK. The stresses that have been created from COVID are stresses we've never encountered before.
Exactly.
In our generations.
Yeah, I'm deeply concerned that the post-traumatic stress of this pandemic will last longer than the pandemic, but that's another conversation. But it's it's definitely a concern of mine. So it's important for people to kind of set their terms. Yes, there's been a lot thrown at us, but figure out what's priority for us and design our lives in a way to make sure that we meet those priorities.
Yeah, I know there's not enough sympathetic people out there to deal with all the issues and problems that humans have.
Yeah.
So where can they get advice? I appreciate you're there, you're a concerned person and what have you, but at the end of the day, is it medical? Is it mental? Is it is it personal? I mean, where do people go?
I think working with a therapist of some sort goes a long way. It's my one regret when I was rebuilding my life is I didn't work with a therapist, and I think it would have made things want to say easier, but it probably would have streamlined some things instead of the fumbling around that I did in the early days. And just understanding, okay, why was that important to me? Why did I behave that way? Why was, what was my programming? What was the beliefs that I had that made me do those things, to feel that I had to do this and take everything on my own back instead of asking for help and doing some things. So, and again, that, depending on the situation, a referral to a therapist may come from your medical provider. So reach out to everybody and get the tips. There's a lot of available things online now, which is great. So there's no shortage of it. So definitely seek help.
Let me give you the title for your next book, Michael.
Yep.
A problem shared is a problem halved. People have got to learn to communicate. In my opinion, what's your view on that?
I agree. We when we're burned out and we're stressed out, we tend to go within, which is what we should be doing when we're normal, or whatever normal is, or when we're feeling well and we're doing things. We should look within to see, okay, how's that going? But what happens is when we're stressed and overwhelmed, we have this fight or flight mentality, and sometimes we're in a fight mode. We're like, we're on our own, we're the only one taking on this dinosaur or this animal. It's like, no, you're not alone. But you have trusted advisors and people that are available, whether friends or family or therapists or other people that can help you navigate through these challenging times. And I highly encourage people to reach out and get that help.
Thank you. That's a brilliant answer. Thank you.
Yeah, it is. And I think with our modern technology, we can communicate in so many different ways. I could send you an Instagram message. I could send you a LinkedIn, a text, a WhatsApp, an email. And it moves us away from what we're doing now, that talking to each other. And I think that's one of the downsides of it, that we are talking to other people less than we once were. And that's when you can pick up the signs, you can talk, and you can, like you said, you can see the signs. So it's having that open eye and an open ear. Definitely. Very good. Thank you very much, Michael. That was really great. And
what about if people, Michael, if people want to talk to you, how do they connect with you?
Best way to find me is go to breakfastleadership.com, or I'm on most of the social media channels. Just look up either Breakfast Leadership, or sometimes it's shortened to the letter B and then Fast Leadership. But reach out to me on any of those channels. I'm very engaging with people that reach out to me, and more than happy to point them in a direction, or chat with them to figure out, okay, what are some things that they can do to help them live a better life. That's my purpose.
And it's LinkedIn somewhere where you're happy to chat?
Yeah, LinkedIn for sure. Yeah, I'm definitely on there. So you can just look up either Michael Levitt or Be Fast Leadership or Breakfast Leadership. Should be able to find me there, and I'll make sure that
I found you. You're definitely there.
For now, that's all for us. All been said for us now. So my final thing is, as I always do, is just remember to, it's a bit hard because of this background, but listen out, listen up, and listen in to the Case broadcast. And it's a goodbye from me, Patrick Twitchett, and
it's a goodbye from me, Melvin Manning, and
a goodbye from me, Michael Levitt.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. That was brilliant.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Excellent.
No, that was fun. I'm surprised how the time flew by.
So, thanks ever so much for those enlightening points today, Michael. And we are going to move on from that now to our favoritism round. My favourite part, the favoritism round. And really, I think the real point behind all of this is, Michael, that people have listened to this guy that they may never have heard of, from Canada and America, as we've heard. these are questions so we can get to know you a little bit better as a person, and for our audience, obviously, too, as well. And it was what we call our favoritism round. So I'm going to lead off with some questions and find out what your favorites are. So your first favorite, please tell us what your favorite pastime or hobby is, please.
Reading, for sure. I've been reading since I was 3 years old. So I love reading. And real quick, when I was burned out, I quit reading. And that should have been the biggest red flag of all. I didn't give myself time to read, because reading educates, it expands the brain. You learn different things. You learn different approaches to things. You learn, and I read fiction and nonfiction, mostly nonfiction, just because I like growth and learning new things. But a good fiction story to get you in and grabs you, and just it's fun to do that too. So reading is definitely my favorite thing.
Excellent. And where you say nonfiction, that's more personal development, is it?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Yep. To learn new things, or look at, even a subject that I'm familiar with, see a different approach. And I think that helps you grow as well, because you can look at things differently and things can look different if you do it that way. So it's always good to learn new ways of looking at things to see if it would improve your life or the ones around you.
Excellent. And obviously fiction is for escapism. And what would you say is your favorite fiction book?
Oh, the fiction stuff. Favorite fiction one. Oh, that's a good one. You know what? I've been reading a lot of the Star Wars, because I love Star Wars ever since I was a little kid.
Oh, you're really
don't start us off on that.
Yeah. So there's so many novels. And what I love about that is it gives you, different insights to different characters, maybe that were in the movies or maybe not, or maybe just a rogue character. And it's just that it's the hero's journey in a way, and they're going through different things and all of that. And it's so, I've been, reading some of the Thrawn books, and, we'll see if Disney Plus has them in some of the new shows and all that. So there's all those things. And my brother's actually a bigger Star Wars geek than I am, but it's good for me to keep up. So we have good conversations when we chat on the phone.
Yeah.
So where does the Mandalorian figure?
Where's the Mandalorian figure?
Where does the Mandalorian figure?
Are we in amongst all of that?
Oh, it was well done. It fits like with the original trilogy a bit. Obviously there's been some, nuances about it, and I'm curious to see how the second season will play out. Because the first one, we really didn't know much about anything, and all of a sudden it grabbed our attention. And now second season, let's see what they're going to do with it. But it's been it's fed the need of some new stuff with some familiar stuff. And I think that's one of the things about Star Wars fans is we're not adverse to new things, but we like how they tie into some familiar things.
It has to have a link, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it does. Yeah, it does. Yep.
Yeah. And I think the fiction side of Star Wars, the original movie, Star Wars 4, the first film, was so cleverly done, because it was your typical hero story, wasn't it? This significant boy on a farm, suddenly dragged into this massive war and everything, and comes out the hero. And George Lucas, when they produced the film, actually got Mark Hamill because he was pretty much of an unknown character, so that everybody could relate to him more. So all these boys, including me, 6 years old, seeing this, I was Luke Skywalker. That's how it grabbed. That's why it's got such a sticky following all these years on, hasn't it?
Yeah, it does.
All these 50-year-old men like me.
Yeah, and it's 40 years. Yeah, or last year was 40-year anniversary of Empire Strikes Back, and I'm like, how is it 40 years? And of course, me being a former accountant, I did the math. I'm like, okay, that's how it's 40. Okay, but it's funny how time flies. That's for sure.
Yeah, indeed. No, good. And I'm glad we got some Star Wars related items in there. That was very good. So moving on, your favourite celebrity from any field and why?
My favorite celebrity from any field. You know, that changes over time. You know, a lot of it is either been, you know, sports figures. Tony Gwynn, he played for the San Diego Padres baseball team. He didn't get a great player, Hall of Fame, you know, unfortunately passed away a few years ago. But, you know, for him, he was such an amazing human being and an amazing baseball player, all-star, all that good stuff, you know, hit like crazy and all that stuff. But because he was in San Diego, you know, where I spent a little bit of time, you know, he didn't get the recognition if he would have been playing in New York or Boston or Chicago. And if he did, then everybody on the planet would know who he was and what he did. So I always admired him because I was familiar with him even, you know, before I was even out that way. And so I always admire him. I admire celebrities that use their celebrityness to do for a greater good, but isn't boasting about it. Like you hear stories, and unfortunately, a lot of times you hear stories about people that pass and they say, oh yeah, this person every year donated their time and donated $1 million to this particular charity because their sister had this disease or they ran into this, but they never said anything about it. They weren't out there. There wasn't a big banner everywhere and all that. So I appreciate people that utilize their gifts and their experiences and their blessings, whatever you want to call it, to help out humanity, but not boast about it. It's like, look at me, I just donated that, you know, and I appreciate that, the kind of the behind the scenes kind of thing. And there's a ton of people out there that do that. So I celebrate those people, and those are the people that I admire the most.
Excellent. No, that's a good answer. Very good. Oh, here we go. Your favourite food or meal?
Oh, my cardiologist. Hopefully, he's not listening to this. Although it's very difficult to get. It's very difficult to get the sandwich. There was a restaurant chain in the U.S. called Bennigan's. They still exist. I think there's a couple locations in Central Florida or maybe Western part of Florida, and it was a chain restaurant. They used to have them all over the U.S. and then, you know, they ran into financial difficulties and closed a lot. But I think there's still a couple left. Their sandwich was the Monte Cristo. And you can get this sandwich in other places. It's basically bread dipped in egg, and there's turkey and Swiss and ham and all that kind of stuff. But the way Bennigan's did it is they deep fried this sandwich. So it was like this big monstrosity of, imagine like, you know, a deep fried sandwich and with the batter all over and all that, and you would dip it in raspberry jam. And I love and wash it down with a Guinness or whatever your favorite pint of whatever happens to be.
Keep going.
Yeah, so I love that. There was actually a Bennigan's across the street from my office in Chicago, and that's why I gained 20 pounds when I worked in Chicago, which was before my cardiac event. So, but yeah, I love that. But then they closed all that. So I haven't had that sandwich in probably a decade, which is probably good for my heart. But if I stumble across the Bennigan's, what I'll do is I'll load up on the cholesterol meds and make sure I'm good there, and then I'm going to power one of those things down, and then the next day I'm going to feel as lethargic as I possibly could, because all of that deep fried, all that stuff, which I normally don't eat, is going to take a toll on my digestive system. So I'm going to make sure that next day is just a complete write-off. So that's my favorite food.
Are you sure you don't want to revisit the burnout proof?
Yeah.
And talk about the Bennigan's burnout.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, should maybe a revision, or I'll add it to a workbook or something.
They call it an addendum.
Exactly. Yeah. Director's cut. Yeah, forgot this. Let's throw this in there. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, a little bit in moderation isn't too bad.
Oh, listen, I put 20 pounds on just on a 2-week break in New Jersey.
Easily done. Easily done.
I end up with lots of New York Reuben sandwiches lined up, and I'm off.
Yep. Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Especially the New York delis and the foods you get in Jersey. That's a beautiful thing about travel is you get to eat at these things, but then you're hoping that the airline doesn't introduce. Well, when you took the flight, you weighed this. Now you this. Okay, this is going to be an extra surcharge.
Yeah, I need a bigger seat.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, I think I have to congratulate you on probably the unhealthiest favourite food ever. the
irony. Yeah, I always tell people eat well, make sure you eat the right foods for you for energy and all this stuff. What's your favorite food? Oh, Monte Cristo, which is a deep fried sandwich. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Do as I say, not as I do. Yeah.
Wonderful. Oh, I dread going. I mean, I'm looking forward to my next trip.
Very good. Right, so we're moving on to some different stuff now. What is your favourite cartoon?
Favorite cartoon would definitely be anything that's Batman related. I love that character. I've loved Batman ever since I was a little boy, even before Star Wars came out. So I was fortunate enough to meet Adam West, who played Batman in the TV.
Wow.
I met him twice. I met him when I was when I was a little kid at 7, and then I met him again when I was 47. So it was like a 4-decade difference, and it was such a. And I got pictures of both of me as a little kid.
No, that's overwhelming. That's overwhelming.
Yeah. Oh yeah. When you're a little kid, and all of a sudden it was an Autorama show in Detroit, and he was there along with Burt Ward, who played Robin, and they were in full costume.
You met Burt as well.
Yep. I've met both of them twice, and as a little kid, when you're 7 years old or whatever age, and your favorite show is this,
Wonderful.
And all of a sudden you're literally, 2 feet away from this person. I remember that as clear as day, and shook his hand. He was wearing the gloves and everything. And I'm like, this is so surreal. I'm like, wow.
This is the thing. I mean,
yeah.
I grew up with it. I loved it all. And Frank Gershon, who was the Riddler, and
he was brilliant. The Riddler was amazing.
All the big names that took the let's say the other starring roles. I mean, it was just amazing.
It was amazing, and I saw this. There was a couple stories, real quick. One, Frank Sinatra lobbied 20th Century Fox hardcore because he wanted to play the Joker. But they already had Cesar Romero.
Cesar Romero was
under contract.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because if you and a lot of people don't, but if you followed Caesar's career and the movies he did and all of that stuff, it was such a dramatic shift for him. And I love when actors can do that, where they can play one type of role, and they do. Robin Williams is another example.
Oh yeah, but I mean Jack Nicholson, he didn't do a bad job.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, everybody that's played the characters, put a nice spin on it.
Jim Carrey would be ideal for those roles, but he hasn't had that opportunity.
Yeah. Yep. I agree.
But even Danny DeVito as the Penguin was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the ones of yesteryear, the ones you're referring to, I mean, they're just irreplaceable.
Yeah. No, I mean, I love watching. To this day, if I flip it around the television and I stumble across that, I stop. I'm like, all right, let's watch it.
I cross over. I mean, Ricardo Montalban, who was Khan in the Star Trek movie. I mean, these people are irreplaceable.
Yeah. Yep. And again, one of those. The reason, and this is real quick, the reason why Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, and Empire Strikes Back tend to be revered as great, incredible movies is the bad guys won.
They did, didn't they?
Yeah.
That throws everybody off.
I loved it. I loved them both.
Yeah. Yep. Me too.
Very true. Very true. Yeah. No, I used to enjoy Batman, and do you know what? The key thing about the old Batman was that there was humor in it, I don't know. I don't think the kids saw the humor. The kids saw the action, the excitement, but there was so much humor for the dads that were watching it with the kids. But it was that thing that you would watch it with your dad because they could see that, when I used to walk up the wall at the side, there'd always be someone stick their head out the window and have a conversation with Batman.
Yep.
It's brilliant. It was
Yeah.
absolutely
Exactly.
brilliantly made. It was fantastic.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I'll have to move on from that, or I'll talk about it all day.
Yes.
So, so your favourite film?
The Dark Knight.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there's a lot of reasons why. One, Heath Ledger's portrayal was
Stunning. Yeah.
stunning.
Yeah.
And just when you think, okay, you got him, something else to sleep, something else to sleep. And two, they filmed a lot of it in Chicago, and I worked and lived in the Windy City for several years. So it was really cool. And I was actually working there when they were filming it. I didn't get to see anything other than closed sets, but it was still seeing the skyline, and it was just the Hans Zimmer and his orchestra. It just, when a movie has a good orchestra and good music in it, it grabs you, and you're like, you could just see the frustration of Batman just getting more and more frustrated by the situation, and getting really close to breaking his own rules and all that. It's like the antagonist was just getting worse and worse, and plot twists and all of that. And yeah, so I love that movie, but I always say this: my favorite movie scene of all time is just as Luke Skywalker is getting ready to blow up the Death Star, and it looks like Darth Vader's going to get him, and all of a sudden here comes Han Solo and the Millennium Falcon, blows it up, says,
Oh yeah,
"You're all clear, kid. Let's blow this thing and go home." That scene right there is like, got it, and it's like it's just that scene is like, okay. And in life, we all want that moment at some point where it's like, got it. And it could be in our work, it could be in our life, it could be in a relationship, it could be a lot of things. That scene is so powerful. And it's definitely my favorite movie scene of all time.
So do you remember the director of The Dark Knight?
Christopher Nolan.
Christopher Nolan, yeah.
Yeah, he did an amazing job in that trilogy. Amazing. And his movies are breathtaking. They really are. I mean, it doesn't matter what he's done. It's like you just watch it, and it's like it entertains you, but it utilizes the brain too. And it's like, if you can couple those two things together, you're definitely an amazing artist and film creator for sure.
Definitely.
Excellent. So moving on from film, your favorite TV show?
I would probably lean towards Batman, because my television viewing tends to be sports. So I like watching a lot of sports. Well, I should say currently, one of my favorite shows to watch is actually a show called NFL Red Zone. So during the National Football League season, NFL Network has this Red Zone. So it's on for about 7 hours. So basically, they just go to different games when a team is about to score. I've watched it for years. It's great because you get to watch a ton of football, very condensed, and see really good plays, and still be able to keep tabs on certain teams. But I've enjoyed watching that show for a long time. So if there was one show that I would definitely say, okay, I want to make sure and watch that, would be that. But other than that, I tend to watch a lot of sporting events. It doesn't matter if it's football, American football, baseball, hockey, basketball, that kind of stuff. Although when I was in the States, ended up watching the darts championship, the William Hill thing. My brother got into that a few years ago, and he's like, we watched it and we're watching it, and I'm like, this is addictive. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. I never thought, okay, we're watching it. We're going, oh, wow. It's like, okay, he's got to do this. Boom, boom, like 320s, boom, boom, boom. It's like,
oh, it's clever.
It is. And everybody in the audience dressed up as in costumes and drinking their face off. So that's on our bucket list to go to that one year. So that'll be 2 weeks that my liver will never forgive me for. But
Do you follow the Bears?
When I worked and lived in Chicago, I know that.
And the Chargers.
Not so much the Chargers, because the Chargers moved to Los Angeles. There's a lot of people in San Diego that are still a little bit bent with the owner about that. But unfortunately for San Diego, they've lost a lot of sports teams over the years. They lost the Chargers to Los Angeles. It used to be the San Diego Clippers. They moved to LA. So in San Diego, we kind of have a love-hate relationship with Los Angeles, but at the end of the day, I understand why people do things, but the Bears have had a couple of rough seasons, and now they're going to be looking for a new coach again. So we'll see how all that plays out.
I follow it because we have the games at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium.
Oh, there you go.
So the teams come over and they do they're kind of show games, but they're proper NFL league games.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that, it's lovely to see. I enjoy it.
Yep. Yeah, it's a blast. I love watching them.
Very good. So the final one on the list, Michael, is your favourite comedy or comedian. Who would that be? Or what would that be?
I would lean towards George Carlin, who's been gone for quite some time.
I know George Carlin.
The reason why, I mean, some of the stuff, his skits, his earlier stuff was good. Some of it obviously vulgar, but he's one of those comedians, and the good ones make you think. And I think that's what.
Well, he was highly controversial.
Very, very, and I would anticipate if he was still alive today. Oh boy!
But you can still see him. They're putting a lot of his stuff on TikTok.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so it's one of those things where it's like a lot of the things that he said and did, obviously controversial, but got the dialogue moving. And I think that's, going back to what we've talked about before, communication is something that, and with social media gets watered down. The conversation that we're having today, albeit using technology, is still face to face. I think we start doing more of that can break down some of these silos that unfortunately I think social media is kind of put up, where we could lob an insult or a complaint or something and hide behind our Twitter feed or whatnot, instead of, approaching somebody and saying, okay, that bothers me, and let's talk this through. That doesn't happen on social media. It's more of a dart thrown at somebody's direction and hide behind, the phone or whatever. And it doesn't solve anything.
Sure. Okay, brilliant. So thank you very much for sharing those bits about you, and I definitely appreciate the Star Wars context in there for sure.
Awesome.
That's a definite. And I think for now that's all for us, all been said for us now. So my final thing is, as I always do, is just remember to, it's a bit hard because of this background, but listen out, listen up, and listen in to the Case broadcast. And it's a goodbye from me, Patrick Twitchett, and
it's a goodbye from me, Melvin Manning, and
a goodbye from me, Michael Levitt.